to just have it over here. And just, come on, I just opened it. Maybe that's no. Oh. Yeah! Oh, I got you. I think it's going to be a good day. Hey, today we're doing rear suspension.
A night worth of disassembly later.
Okay, here we are finally working on something during daylight, which is kind of a rarity for me, unfortunately. And I'm not quite sure exactly how to feel about it just yet, but something has been bothering me about this rear suspension setup that I just feel like needs to be addressed before I go too far. Must have had a cloud come on in. Anyway, we've gotten our hands on some measurements already that you can see right on over here that we had measured, as well as these over here. And it turns out the springs are just like each other, so I was worried about them wearing a little bit differently, and I was going to get all kinds of specific about which one went on which side and stuff like that, but after seeing that, I've kind of relaxed on that a little bit. But the problem that I'm kind of running into, and I'll see if I can show you guys about this, is I plan on running with these instead of using the typical shackle and hanger assembly, because I believe that this will give me more stability whenever I'm cornering and maybe a little bit more consistent control over leaf spring. Leaf springs, especially on shackles, have a tendency to, I don't know how the light's doing that way, they have a tendency to rebound with a vengeance when they've been compressed unless you really have them taken care of the right way. So I'm trying to see if I can find a way to help overcome that. I cannot find a way to get my hands comfortable. Anyway, I'm trying to find a way where I can overcome that. And so that's why I'm thinking about using the leaf spring sliders. I think that might be a solution. However, it's one of those things that's highly debated online. The problem is that I don't know exactly where to mount them. And I was thinking about this the other day. I know that I need to do a certain amount of lift to these springs to get the thing to ride level and be performing the way we want it to. But especially once we re-arch it, it's going to be really tough to find out where those things are supposed to live. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do first is I'm going to measure these leaf springs eye to eye, but on the length of the spring. So that'd be the equivalent of if I were to take the spring and lay it out flat, like so, take it from this just to lay it out flat instead. And, obviously it has a longer distance when it's flat than it does when it's curved. And I think that I'm going to assume, which of course I know makes an ass out of you and me, I think that I'm going to assume that the leaf spring is going to be flat at full compression. So I think with that in mind, I'm going to take that measurement that I get whenever I measure these things from their flat surface. So basically I'm going to take that string and run it all the way down on the other side, of course. I'll show you in a second. And I'm going to take that measurement and I am going to measure from, I really should do something with these. I'm going to measure from this pivot point here. The leaf spring is going back in there. So I'm going to measure from this point and just measure a straight line at that distance over to wherever this thing's going to terminate. Now, I got to get these out of the way because I got some mocking up to do. But essentially, I'm going to mock this thing up in this position. There it goes, scratching on my paint. It's going to be in this position essentially, but I'm going to measure that. So this is the leaf spring at full compression at its maximum expansion point. So even if I go into negative travel, that's going to draw this back in that direction again. So I'm going to measure this as my maximum compression point, and then everything else is everything in between. I got full droop over here, and I've got ride height probably somewhere around about here. And then this, of course, too, has to mount exterior of the frame, which means I need to make maybe a couple of gussets, and for now, it's just going to be tacked into place. And I'm going to make that consistent on both sides. Here's what I was talking about in terms of that offset. You can see right there is my front leaf spring, and here's my frame rail. So it's not as easy as like some of the Jeep guys get to do and just mount it straight here. And then this hanger I've got to get rid of. Now, in competition to this, and I've done this before, and I will say credit where credit is due. A lot of people, let me go actually back to this because I have to show you guys the examples. A lot of people that are doing the long travel leaf spring setup on these Broncos and F-150s, they will take this out and they'll get a new one that is either, there's a plate that you can buy that will extend this down by actually the distance of these rivets here. So it'll extend it on down, lowering this shackle down to, I'm going to guess about right here, and then they get a longer leaf spring. So the longer hanger. And so the distance gained on the hanger doesn't equate to a drop in the Bronco. It keeps it same height as before, but the longer shackle hanger allows for more leaf spring movement. So credit where credit is due, it is a fantastic idea. But then you got a longer shackle that can do more waving back and forth like that as the vehicle's running on down the trail. And so you can have potentially more instability. But whenever I did it, I honestly think the reason that I had the instability in my setup is because I had the shocks leaned way, way, way forward, and near full compression, there just wasn't a whole lot of control. And they were just simple little wimpy, Bilstein 5100s, which are great shocks. I like them, but under that much abuse and that much wheel travel, it's really tough for that little tiny, I think it's like 1.75 inch, maybe 1.8 inch diameter shock tube. So it's going to fade very, very quickly. So I'm going to do some grinding. I'm going to pull those shackles out, and I'm going to cut some metal and make some mock-up material. And then we're going to tack weld some stuff into place and see if we can't locate these tools the way they need to go. So ain't nothing to it to do it. There we go. The trick is to try to keep this as flat as possible. Oh no! Sure everything's still in frame. Alright, now that is, I'm going to call that 53.5 right there. I saw something on TikTok about being able to measure these things, but I don't have that. Oh, this cheap Chinesium doesn't have that. So we're going to call that 53.5 from here to there, plus 2.25 as an average of this thing center to center. So our measurement needs to be center to center. So we're going to add 2.25 to 53.5, which is going to be 55.75. I'm going to go note that down. All right, we said it was 53.5 plus 2.25, so 55 and 3/4. That is our flat eye to eye. So that is important there. And so like we had said before, we go and squeeze on over here. I'm going to measure from that pivot point there to this thing at full bump. And I think I'm going to add 1/4 inch because I don't want this to be stopping like that. So I'm going to say, let's do 56 inches. That'll probably be all right. So 56 inches from this point in this position to that is what we're going to mock up. Now, I'm going to be tacking that into place here, and then I'm going to disassemble these down to the last little bit, to the top of the top leaf only. So we only got the one. And I'm going to set this axle back underneath of those with that tacked into place, and we're going to cycle it and see how it does, and take a quick measurement about how this wheel travel is going to work. And that's going to let us know kind of how the fruits of our labor are going. Now, from there, I think what I'm going to try to do is reassemble the pack loosely, and then I'm going to set the vehicle on the ground with the tires on it. And I'm going to do so to get the ride height, and that will let me know the height that I need to adjust, because we need to have about a 4 inch or so total net lift from this whole system. So I am going to get cracking on that. We're going to put some good, nice, and hefty tacks on this device over here. There we are. Alright, so the plan is with these plates here, I'm going to go on top of the sliders. Now the front of the sliders is facing me, the back is towards you. I'm going to place these somewhat like so, and I'm going to give ourselves a good nice little weld here. And this other side's being cleaned too, and that can be welded underneath of the frame rail. Now the frame rail itself is 2.5 inches wide, and I don't want to have this thing hovering at the edge of that, but I do know that the outside of this needs to be, oh gosh, 1 9/16 over. So I need to be at least that far over, and then I need to have a bit of meat to weld to on the frame itself. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little measurement there. I'm going to say 1 9/16 plus, oh gosh, 2.5. That would almost be 4 inches. Because it's almost 1.5 plus 2.5, roughly speaking. In fact, actually, it's a little bit more. But I'm going to go less than that. Let's say if I go over, if that were 4 inches, 1.25 inches back in would be 3. Let's just do 3. I think 3 would be a good number. I think that I am, I dare say, happy with that. So. There we have it. Standing off from the frame just a tiny bit. And we can mount that in there and see. Now, height is still a concern of mine, but I haven't gotten that far yet. We're just literally mocking it into place just to see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into. So, let's dare try that next, shall we? Okay, so this is our mock-up iteration here. Got a little shark fin going on there, and got our little, plate on and stuff like that. I've got some markings on here. I had marked there and once more over there to indicate where things are going to be sitting on the frame. And then on the frame itself, I wanted to locate them both the same. So let me see if I can squeeze underneath here. Hopefully you can see all right. I measured this piece here, found out the distance that we have right here, and found out that to the center where about the bolt's going to sit, plus a little bit of room, was about 2 inches. And so I measured on in here to, let's see, from the ends to where this line was at, which is the 56-inch mark for our leaf springs, and decided, okay, well, we need to have this thing sit 2 more inches back to give us some space. So 5 inches in is what I came up with. I did the same thing all the way over there already, and that's looking pretty sweet. But we have no idea how this is going to operate when we mock it up, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. So this is going to be fit just like so. Let me see if I can do this one hand. Really difficult to do. There we go, perfect. It's going to fit just like so, all the way at the end of that line, and then of course this line here, really tough to see, is going to line up with the edge of the frame, roughly speaking. It ain't perfect, but in doing so, we're going to be able to mock it up. I'm going to check a couple more things. I'm going to get this really well tacked into place, and then we're going to go ahead and try to just pin the leaf springs into place. We're not going to bolt them on down or anything like that, and I'm going to hope that my tacks are strong enough that I can actually put that axle back underneath of the springs and lift the whole thing up. And I want to see how things are going to look ride height wise. Measure from the frame down to the axle and measure a couple of different things, make sure everything's happy, check a couple of clearances, and if I can, I'd like to lift it up high enough that I can measure, let's see, a 35-inch tire, half of that is 17 and a half. So I want to get the center of the axle 17 and a half inches off the ground to make up for a 35-inch axle, and see how things look from there, see how things are doing, and then see if the measurement from the ground to the frame equates a typical Bronco on 35-inch tires with a 4-inch lift. That is the next task. So I'm going to go ahead and start mocking that stuff up. I will see you guys when things are in place and we're getting ready to start some trouble. Place that one up. Easy roll. Weird. It wasn't as happy as I thought it would be. Yeah, cool. Cool. Exaggerated that. Huh. Sure kind of wish I had given myself a little extra space though. Let's see. Just get this down for a second. Oh, I lost my glasses too. Oh, we're done. So this is what we have so far then. It's just kind of tacked into place, that's all, nothing special there. All that's going to be cleaned up and taken care of before final assembly, but if I did that correctly, we should be in line, if we look at it from this direction. Let's see, there's that. Alright, so far so good. Look at us go. Alrighty, now my concern is next that there's obviously going to be an arch from this perch over to this perch here. And if we look back a little bit, I don't know if I can zoom out enough. Hold on, let me see if I can put the zoom here. There we go, perfect. Got the zoom out so we can see both. So my concern is that this over here looks to be pretty darn low in comparison to that over there. And if you look here, there's a plate in the front, so we can't go perfectly straight, which means that bottoming out might be an issue. So we might have to clearance this, or we might have to take this and raise it up in the frame some, depending on what our geometry looks like. So that's all stuff. That's the whole reason we're doing the mock-up. Now I've got their side on too, just as well. So far we're lining up pretty decently for a good little mock-up to see what we're looking like. Now, I don't know if I got this one straight because I just kind of put it in place and call it good. Let's see. No, that's looking pretty darn good, yeah. So, it ain't perfect, but like I said, it's just a temporary mock-up so we can put the springs in and see if it's going to work. And that is what we're going to do next. So, again, I need to have two hands. I'll get you guys back in just a second. All right, here we are doing some mock-up here, and I kind of ran into one of our first major issues, which bound to happen, especially when you're using off-the-shelf universal fabrication goodies. So I have, of course, this in place here, as you can see. One issue that I happen to run into, let me go and squeeze on over to this side so I can show you. I can see if I can do this with one hand, is that our spring is mighty wide on these things, and this is kind of skinny. And the problem that I ran into, if I can do this one-handed, is, there we go. That is quite the fit, if I dare say so. Now, my first thoughts were, oh, no worries, just go ahead and grind this down and make it all fit, because the spring fits in there. It's just the bushing that doesn't. But that's not good, because under tension and under the operation, this bushing is supposed to flex. And in other performance systems, when you see like an aftermarket spring, instead of using a bushing like this, they have these like Delrin inserts and then a sleeve that goes through. And those actually stick out of the end of the spring a little bit. So it occurs to me, this is probably made for a 2.5-inch spring, and this is a 3-inch spring. So that is a little bit of a problem. Now that is, of course, one issue there. But another issue that I'm seeing, and I may have pointed this on that side though, but if you were to imagine the axle being mounted underneath of this and it's got to compress up, this thing has to come all the way up where the axle meets this bump stop. Now I'm going to maybe have a different bump stop installed, maybe something bigger and more capable of handling the abuse, but this is an axle under spring application, which means that this spring needs to be able to travel above the height of this bump stop in order to make contact with it on the axle side of things. And that's where we want things to stop. We don't want the shock to come to a complete collapse because that'll destroy the shocks, and we don't want the spring to run out of movement space because that'll end up breaking other components like this or maybe even the spring itself, which will really ruin my day. So that's the next problem there. You can see the height of this. Let me see if I can sit down at the same level as the mount here. Let me see. There we go. Right about here is the level of the mount. You can see, we're sitting right about level there, moving right across. We're a little bit below that, which is good, and I'll take some measurements there, but if we were to imagine a straight line coming from the very end there, if we were to move that to the end, a straight line coming across down here, you see that flat line is certainly beneath the space of this. I haven't put any actual tape measures to it, and I haven't gotten the magical string of truth stuck in there, which I might do next just for demonstration purposes. But the problem is that the spring itself is under the bump stop, which means that when it's flat at full compression, our axle is about 1.5 miles away from that bump stop, which means that we kind of got the equivalent of a lift block system or a spacer system to gain our height, and that's not very good. So probably should have seen some of this in hindsight, but all of that stuff indicates that most definitely, for sure, without a doubt, we need to move those sliders up in the frame, move them up higher away from the lower end of the vehicle, and mount them in such a way that they'll have a little more effectiveness for us. So I've got to figure out a plan there, and then I also got to find out a way to make this leaf spring slider a little bit wider to accommodate for our wider spring. I've got some ideas running through my head, but it looks like I need to kind of go back to the drawing board quite a bit. So that's what mock-up is for. I just found out that a lot of the ideas I had ended up not being something that could work, but it's not the end of the road. It's just simply turning to the next chapter. So I'm gonna probably start picking up because this place is quite a mess and it's getting a little bit late, and I haven't really run my creative juices enough to figure out what it is I need to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and get cleaned up, and you'll be seeing me maybe in the next part, or maybe something like that. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be splitting these episodes up, so I'll see you the next time I see you, whenever I get those creative juices going again.